Hi, my name is Ilya, I am CEO and co-founder of Bitskout. So in this video, I wanted to teach you a very simple technique called event and triggers whenever you want to build any process. So it's very useful whenever you have to start from scratch with the client or with your team, figuring out how things should go, or you want to have a look at your current process and you are not really satisfied how they're working. This simple technique will help you understand which are the bottlenecks and how you can bring everyone on the same page. So I was leading technical support for a very large corporation, and there our challenge was, and the whole team was really stressed about that, is that whenever we miss some deadline, the fines were really heavy. It's telecommunications, or whatever problem you have, it might affect lots of people. So we had to come up with a technique or a way for us to quickly understand where we are in each process and to mitigate all the risks related to the fact that any ticket is not progressing through our system how it should be according to our agreements with the clients. So we had lots of challenges with that, and eventually we have figured out the way how we can start from any process and how to track any step how the ticket is pushed through the pipeline of our statuses. And this technique is called event and triggers, and this is what I'm going to teach you. Now, the first step, the most important step, is that you need to understand how the information comes to your team or to your company. And I'm talking about not the subsequent information that is already under discussion of the task, but how new information is coming in. And controlling this flow, putting these flows into one single point of contact that we called in our case a queue manager is very important, because that protects the team that is working already on something from overload. Otherwise, if information comes from different directions, your team becomes like a little bit confused, like what's going on, where it should go and who should ask. And eventually you end up managing all the work between people. That shouldn't happen this way. To control the incoming flows, you need to have a list of how the customers send you requests, how they arrive, and etc., how the team submits feedback, and list all those things with via forms, via emails, etc., and understand how you can map them into one we call a service board or service project. The project whose sole task will be managing all these requests. Imagine that you have in the old movies like Mad Men, you can see like whenever you want to bring something to a new department, you come to a secretary, put a piece of paper here, and then she distributes this to her archive cabinet, and then once somebody comes in, they put it from their list. Second step that's very important to implement is that events set triggers. So whenever you have a new email or new request, there should be a trigger that triggers the next step. It should never be like, oh, I have to call Mike to tell him that the new request has come. That's not going to work, because whenever something becomes like a non-event based or not trigger based, you kind of can forget. So Mike can forget about the email, etc. But when there's something comes in and some information is extracted or understood or checked or whatever, you should set the trigger, and then based on that trigger, for example, a new email comes in and you see that it's a quotation request, and you set the trigger quotation request, and then based on that trigger, the next step is defined. Next step is not defined by the fact that you forward the email to someone. Okay, that's not a very efficient way, because again, this is really, you can lose track of times. But then once request got assigned a trigger called quotation request, then it is moved and progressed through your pipeline of the process. Then the next step is incoming quotation request to a team that handles quotation requests, and they have a new trigger set new. Then they do something with that and put it to trigger analyze. So it's very important that the task progresses via triggers. It should not progress via direct interactions. Sometimes, in some cases, that can happen, but you have to clearly agree this with the team when there is an interpersonal communication. For example, you want to make some complex decision where human analysis is required. In this case, you set the same trigger, like under analysis. Next thing is that whatever tool you use, usually you try to map it the projects in this tool how you work, but you should also never forget that you have a chance to build service boards. in our case, in technical support, we had a queue board. It's like everything that comes in comes to a queue, and then somebody has to analyze that. Nothing can come directly to an engineer. If it happens, the process, he has to put it in the queue. He cannot accept the request coming directly to him. Only the discussion under existing request, because that is a different thing. So this is called a service board. The point of the board is just to manage work or analyze something. You can create a set of boards that come in. But the point is, like, the task has to be aligned and analyzed and provide sufficient context when it arrives to your employee, the moment they start immediately working. Next thing is define the fallback. So whatever automations you build, whatever systems you build, there should always be a plan B. And in this case, you define the fallback action. Usually what happens is, whenever an error happens, whenever the email is not full, whenever the file is not attached, or anything that happens, it should have a fallback action. Fallback action is basically a different trigger. A trigger that is monitored by someone. In our case, there were requests that we couldn't assign, or they were overwhelming, or they were too important. And we had an engineer that was on duty. And his task was to track the due dates. So his task was not to solve problems like every engineer does. His task was to understand which problems are coming out into a red area, the problematic area from contractual point of view that we have to deliver according to deadlines. Now, and this duty rota is really important to distribute between the team, because there will always be exceptions, there will always be things that happen unpredictably, but you have to have a process for those unpredictable things. In general, the project manager or you as a leader is the one who has to organize that, and basically you should track it, okay? Unless you have a very efficient process and you can assign rotas, but for rota we had a different reward. So the person who was on rota, due to the fact that he spent his own time and it was an extra stress, he can only stay on rota 1 week per month, and he had an extra salary for that. And next thing, reviews. So you have to review your projects once in a while. Every process can be updated. New automations come in, new things can happen, new statuses can appear. You just cannot assume that the process is just, we're gonna build it and it's gonna run one year like that. No. You have to always take a look at that. Usually we had a quarterly review with our team, which works, which doesn't work. There are lots of different frameworks how you analyze that. But we wanted to make it simple for engineers, so they don't have to go for, if they wanted they could, but if they didn't, we didn't want them to get an extra training just to have to run a review. Now, what we did is we had 4 questions. What is working, what is not working, what should be improved, and what should be removed from the process. It was a very simple exercise, but when you get lots of feedback, same questions were actually asked for the customer, then you map it correctly, you see where you have issues. But again, the point was, like, we understood that the process is never perfect. And that was like one of the most important findings that we had, and that allowed us to move from 5.6 out of 10 customer satisfaction to 9.1. We were the best, one of the best technical support teams in the world. So, as a summary, number 1, you have to control the new information flow. It has to be channeled into a single board, and there the tasks should be distributed. Second thing is that you need to focus on building the process based on events and triggers. It should never be interpersonal communication. Sometimes it should, but not in all the steps. This will allow you to see everything very clearly when it happens. 3, you need to also have service boards whose sole task is to analyze something, and they should not be visible for the team. The team should get one project or one board and get the task there. That's it. Number 4 is that you have to define a fallback. Fallback is critical because, like, if anything can go wrong, and defining a fallback is a very good way to mitigate that. Because your job is not only to instantiate ideal process. His job is serve customers, and things happen all the time. And number 5 is a constant review. So you have to review what is going on, what's happening, and what's working and what's not working with your team. Your team is the one who should be always in this decision-making process, because they also have great ideas. And also what they do is, like, if they love the process, it's gonna run 10 times faster. And that's it, guys. So if you want to have a play with the process, download here in the link our magic process map, which is just a simple game that you can use to play with your team to map the process based on event and triggers. It's a reverse domino game. You can play it on a whiteboard, or just, you know, print the page and cut it and play it on a coffee table. And that's it. I'm Ilya. Stay tuned for the next episode. Subscribe if you want. Follow us on our social networks. And grab your magic process map. It's free. Nothing is required. And just play with the process that you already have. Thanks a lot. See ya.